So step 1, we're going to make this cardboard template 22 by 15 centimetres. We'll mark the ACES and draw a diagonal line all the way along there. And then we're going to make some other markings on for the pubic tubercle, the superficial ring and the deep ring. So the pubic tubercle is going to be 8 centimetres from this corner, and later on we'll be sticking this stone on here to represent the pubic tubercle. The superficial ring is just above that and just lateral to it, and make a little triangular marking there. And then 16 centimetres from this corner, we're going to mark the deep ring, and we'll be cutting a hole at this point just above the line. It's also useful for later on to mark a line which is where the superficial vein is going to lie. We're then going to make some holes in our cardboard template, a hole for the deep ring, a hole for the superficial ring, and a pinhole here where we mark the pubic tubercle. And then keep this template because you can use it over and over again. So now we're going to cut out the back wall, which is just a piece of cardboard, and use the template that you made, and we're going to punch through for the pencil where the pubic tubercle marking was made. Then we're going to put a little bit of super glue on that dimple and just around it. And then we're going to fix the pubic tubercle in place. And what we've found is a small rough stone with a flattish surface works best. You want something fairly prominent because we tried with buttons and you couldn't feel them through all the surfaces. So just hold that in position for a few minutes. And then what you'll find is it does stick really well there. Now we're going to make the back wall of the inguinal canal, and from a piece of felt you're going to use this cardboard template to cut out a piece like this. And then for the back wall we need to mark the deep ring. So using the hole that you had in your original template, mark it through and then cut out the deep ring at that point. And then it's nice to mark the medial border of the deep ring with the inferior epigastric vessels. So we've got a little bit of white thread there and blue to mark the inferior epigastric artery and vein. And you can either sew these into position, which I've done here, or you can glue them into position. And then it will end up like that. The next step is we're going to make the cord, and we're using this thick type of haberdashery wadding. And what we're going to do is thread an artery, a testicular vein, and a vas deferens through the cord. We're using wool and red and blue to represent the artery and vein. For the vas deferens, it's nice to have something quite thick because it feels like the vas deferens. And you can either use ordinary string or you can use the cotton type knitting thread. You can thread it through either with one of these gizmos, or alternatively, you haven't got that, you can use a needle with a big eye and thread it through with the needle. It's just a little bit fiddlier, but it works just as well. And then thread through either your thick cotton knitting thread or your string through as well. And it's nice to make an ilioinguinal nerve, and we want it to be quite fragile. So what we're doing is using knitting thread here, and this is one that's made up of several strands, and carefully we're taking out one strand there. Which then we can use as the nerve there. And then with spray glue, you can fix the nerve onto the front of the cord. And here's one that I made earlier. So it's got the string, the vas deferens, testicular artery, testicular vein, all threaded through, and an ilioinguinal nerve just laying on the front here. So next we're going to make the sack, and here we're using this power mesh, but there's other things you can use. So you could use hosiery like stockings and tights, and also you can use organza, and you can also use a plastic bag in a country where it's legal to do so. And we're going to cut out from the pattern piece. You'll see the templates for the sack. You want to cut out 2 from the power mesh or whatever you're using. And then with a sewing machine on a zigzag setting with a small stitch, machine all the way around, but leaving the bottom here open. And then you want to cut the excess away close to the stitch line all the way around. And then we want to turn this inside out. And you can use a pencil or something just to push the seams out. To get this out. Now we're going to put the hernia sack and the cord through the deep ring here. So back to this one we made earlier. And it's nice to put the sack towards the backs to make it a bit more challenging. And just thread that through. And then you want a reasonable amount more here because we want to stick this down. Now we're going to go back to this that we made earlier, the pubic tubercle. Put a lot of fabric glue along the back here, and also put a little bit of fabric glue between the cord and the sack. And then we're going to stick this all down there. And you can weight it down with a heavy book, or alternatively, if you've got some of these, they're very convenient to put round the edge. And this one is at that stage. So we've got the back wall completed, the felt, the inferior epigastric vessels, the hernia sac, the cord and the nerve coming out of the deep ring, and this is all stuck down. So now we're going to make external oblique and inguinal ligament, and this is a cheap coarse sheeting material, and the good thing about it is it's got a strong weave in it which will simulate the fibres of external oblique. So now you need to just print off this pattern piece from the instructions, and if you print it off on A4 paper it will come true to size. Mark and cut out the superficial ring there. And also, just as a reminder to yourself, just mark the grain line here, which I'll explain in a minute. And you can also put a pencil line across here, which is where the stiffener is going to go. So we've now pinned the paper pattern in position with this line along the grain line, which is the line where the fabric will naturally split. And then we can just carefully cut out that pattern piece all the way around. And then go back to your paper pattern, and just with a pencil, mark on your external ring there. And then cut out the external ring. And then we're going to use some fabric stiffener just to help us make the inguinal ligament. And this is the iron-on type. And you want fairly low weight stuff, so either a lightweight or a medium weight fabric stiffener. And then we're going to apply some fabric stiffener on the outside here, and then turn it over, and on the inside apply a little strip of fabric stiffener just to the lateral border of the superficial ring. And it's worth just taking a moment to make sure that you've got the orientation right. So this piece is on the outside and this piece is on the inside. It's quite easy to get those the wrong way round. We're now going to glue the external oblique and inguinal ligament into position. So what we want to do is run a strip of strong fabric glue just along that lower edge. And then we're going to flip that over and we're going to glue it into position on the diagonal. And just make sure that the cord and the hernia are inside the inguinal canal there. And then you can clip that in position with these clips or weight it down with the book and leave it to dry. And you'll see this is one that is now glued on, and we can roll this over and create the inguinal canal. And if we look at this from the inside, you'll have the cord and the sac inside. And now we want to bring the cord structures through the superficial ring. And if it's a large hernia, you can bring the hernia down through the ring as well. What we're going to now do is roll this over and stretch and glue this down. So if I turn it over, run a line of strong fabric glue along the top and put this on a bit of a stretch and bring it down. And then a line of glue along this side and stretch this corner across. And then you should end up with it like this. So this is stretched and glued across. When they operate on this, they will incise along here, along external oblique into the superficial ring. They won't actually see this fabric stiffener on the outside because the superficial layer will be on it. So to make the scarpus fascia and the subcutaneous fat, we're going to use this haberdasher's wadding, and here we've got the very thin stuff. And what I've done with these pieces is I've dyed them, and the simplest way of dyeing them is to just put a teaspoon of turmeric in a bowl of hand hot water and leave them for 10 minutes. They tend to come out very, very yellow when you do that, and if they're a bit too yellow for your taste, if you just leave them out in the sun or in the daylight for a little while, they will fade off. So we're going to have 2 layers of fat with a layer of scarpa between. So spray glue over there, put your scarpas in position, spray glue again, and then just before you put the last layer of fat in, using this original marking that you made on your template, put a superficial vein into position, spray over again, and put your last layer of fat. And then you can just weight that down for a few minutes. And then spray glue all over your model here. You can put a bit just there. And then put this fat scarpa sandwich on top and stick that on, and then weight it down for a few minutes. So now you should end up with this. You've got your external oblique on there, and you've got your superficial fat and your scarpas and your superficial vein. So what we're using for the skin is this leather, plastic leather, but it doesn't have a subcuticular layer. And what we found is a lot of people using the model wanted to do a subcuticular stitch at the end. And so you can glue felt to it to make the subcuticular layer. So from the pleather, cut out a piece which is 36 by 25 centimetres, and then turn it over, and using your template, mark out the centre of it. And then you can apply the felt that you're using to the centre. The one I've got here is from a craft shop. It's pre-sticky, and you can take that off and just stick it down. If you haven't got the pre-sticky one, just apply some fabric glue and then stick it down and then leave that to dry. An alternative you can use, again from the craft shop, is this foam, which is for children's craft projects. And again, this is very convenient because it comes pre-sticky and it makes a very good subcuticular. And then mark off the corners, and we're going to cut those corners off. So before we stick the skin on, it's just worthwhile just orientating this in case it's difficult to feel afterwards. So just feel for your pubic tubercle, and I'm just going to make a mark on here in this corner just to tell me that that is the lower medial part of the model. And then spray glue all over that layer, and then stick the skin on. And then turn it over, and this time with strong fabric glue along this edge to stick these in position. And again, these little clips are really handy if you have them. And then weight it down and leave it to dry.